So greetings everyone, Dr. McGlynn is in our studio today. We are very pleased to see her, and I've heard you've staying in Ukraine right now. How's your trip right now?
Yes, my trip's been very nice, thank you. I was in Kiev for a week and now I'm back. I'm back in Kharkiv.
Okay, so returning to your main direction, the politics, and I know you have some publications about Russia and about Russian politics. Why we cannot trust and why the US cannot trust any promises from the Russian side during negotiations at this moment? Have experience, scientific experience in researching that. Please tell a couple of things of that.
Well, because of precedent, we have numerous examples of where Russia has not fulfilled its obligations. It has immediately undermined ceasefires. The obvious examples, particularly in relation to this conflict, since they indeed happened as part of this war, albeit before the full-scale implementation, full-scale invasion, would be the Minsk Accords, would be elements such as, or tragedies and atrocities such as what happened at Debaltseve, for example. So there are numerous examples of the fact that Russia does not keep its word. Moreover, Russia's strategic objective, its key aim in this war, is to destroy Ukraine as a political subject, in the sense that to destroy Ukraine's political identity and its true political sovereignty. And since Russia has not achieved that goal through military means, it will now see an opportunity, particularly in the Trump administration's overtures, to begin to try to achieve that by other means, by political warfare. But it won't fight fair because it never fights fair.
Do you think that the West will bite this time, or they have learned the mistakes of the past?
Well, I think we need to differentiate here between Europe, broadly understood, including the UK, but for the purposes of this conversation, separating it from Ukraine. The Ukraine is obviously a part of Europe, culturally and geographically, and the US. And I think we can adopt Canada into Europe for these purposes as well. Because I don't believe that the US understands it. I don't think that the current US administration are very focused on the details. I don't think they are the sort of politicians who are that focused on the details until it comes to making deals. Of course, President Trump is highly transactional. He wants to understand what's in it for him. And I'm sure that the Russians will be offering and have already offered much that is of financial benefit to him. And I think the role here will be for European countries who I think have learned their lesson, or certainly in the case of the UK, where I'm from, I think we've very clearly learned that lesson. And I think it's going to be a real struggle for them to keep him on the right side. Yesterday's press conference between the Prime Minister Keir Starmer and President Trump was slightly promising. It certainly wasn't as awful as some of the more recent public statements of the American president have been. But yes, I think there's a lot that remains to be seen, and of course he's a highly unpredictable actor.
Yes, and for the first time in 3 years of this big war, I'm saying war since 2022, we have heard decisive claims from President of France and Prime Minister Starmer that deployment of military personnel, of troops, of airplanes is not only likely, but also possible and will happen after a ceasefire or a peace deal is made. And if we compare it even with the rhetorics of 2024, when all of the global actors in Europe said it is out of the agenda, it is impossible. And right now we hear the decision, the parliaments have agreed on, the parliament of the Netherlands have adopted a resolution that allows their army to be deployed as peacekeeping force in Ukraine. We hear from Turkey too that they could join the potential force to hold Russia back. What was the the generator of this shift. It is a geopolitical shift, a geomagnetic shift. I don't know how to call that.
I think there are a few aspects. So one of them is that the US has been telling Europe for a long time it's no longer, such a focus of its strategic interests in terms of global security. It needs to take more responsibility for its own defense. And obviously, if European countries want to keep the US on board as much as may be possible, they are going to need to actually follow through on some of their rather declarative statements. Second, European security itself is threatened by European nations themselves individually feel threatened by the new global positioning coming out of Washington, and everybody understands that a Russian victory or Russia succeeding in destroying Ukraine is not in any European country's interest. So there's two aspects there that are slightly more kind of selfish ones. Thirdly, I mean, a lot of European countries, and again, I have to talk more mainly for sort of the UK and Scandinavia, they are really engaged in Ukraine's struggle. I mean, even on an emotional level, there's huge public support in these countries for Ukraine. Politically, to allow something terrible to happen in Ukraine would be very, very difficult domestically. But fourthly, it's to do with ideas. I mean, the air defense idea has been around for a long time in various iterations, from the very start of Close the Skies. But now I think enough work has been happening. Certainly for my part, I've been working with fellow European, both political sort of specialists, academics, advisors, but also with air defense, individuals with former or current careers in air defense to work around ideas of such as a Sky Shield initiative. And I think that has the most chance of being implemented should there be a ceasefire, because realistically, peacekeeping I'm afraid that here I very much agree with your head of military intelligence, Kirilla Budanov, that I think peacekeeping is historically a bit discredited. And there's a difference between peacekeeping and peace enforcement. So peacekeeping is what led to Srebrenica. Peace enforcement, which is what happened in Kosovo, involved bombing Serbia. So they're really quite different cases, and it's important that we understand that the latter is not an example of peacekeeping. So I'm not sure what use. I don't, in principle, have a problem with it. I just don't see that it would offer much practical use, and I think it would be a huge kind of domestic political cost, especially since no other troops in Europe are prepared to fight the sort of war that Ukrainian troops are fighting.
Yes, and possibly this will be more like mental support, political support, demonstrative support. Imagine that British troops, French troops, and other European armies of the villain. So we have some European allies that are unwilling to do anything. And I believe you know those countries right now, those political regimes, and the willing ones. Imagine them coming to Ukraine, seeing the front line. Possibly it will be a ceasefire, so no active warfare, but still they will be gaining some on-the-line experience, some real battlefield trench experience. You know how the war in Donbass was going on since 2014 and 2015, the Minsk Accords to 2022. It was like a slowly brewing conflict with skirmishes here and there and artillery shelling. But for the most part, it was an active front line. And is it possible that they want to achieve this level of preparedness the same way that North Korea is now trying to train its troops in Ukraine by going into fights with Ukrainian troops in the Kursk region?
I don't think so. I don't think that the offers of peacekeeping troops are really that serious. To be honest, I think they are about what you just discussed, that declarative political support to bolster morale. But I think that, yes, and I actually really applauded Keir Starmer for coming out, even though I'm very cynical or skeptical about peacekeeping. I really applauded Keir Starmer for coming out when he did, because it was important that some leadership was provided. So I think we have the symbolic plane, but then we have the actual practical plane. And I think they're having some form of Sky Shield, of European flights, of European fighter jets, which can be based, in Poland or Czech Republic or Romania, depending on elections, that can cover Ukraine's critical infrastructure. particularly the energy plants that can provide cover for Ukraine to reindustrialize. Because I think we all know, those of us who don't live in cloud cuckoo land, that any fire will be a temporary element. This will not quench Russia's desire to destroy Ukraine. The only thing that can stop that is Ukraine being able to defend itself. And I think that needs to be the focus if there is a ceasefire. And I feel awful saying that because I'm in East Ukraine. I know how exhausted everybody is. I can see how exhausted everybody is. But I think realistically, I do.
And the Soviet Union has fallen apart after certain people have passed away. So certain people that glued in the entire system, totalitarian system together, and other people with a more democratic set of mind came in, and the processes started that already could not be stopped. Again, as Kirill Budanov has said, if there is a leader in Russia, everything can change in one day. Right now, there's no leader, so we have to protect ourselves, I believe, to be able to protect the country, its sovereignty, and just sit and wait. Sit and wait for some internal processes on the other side, on the aggressor side, to start, so they change their position, and they don't want to destroy Ukraine or any other country anymore. Is that a possibility?
I think the possibility of Russia becoming a democratic country is very, very low, and I don't think that it really has any sympathies among the elites. And if we think about, Russia is obviously not Ukraine. It doesn't have the same self-organizational powers that Ukraine has, the same kind of personal networks of resilience, and so on and so forth. But on another level, in any revolution, or even in a kind of passive one where there's a huge change of approach, which Russia, being a more Western-oriented democracy, would involve, you do still not need to have elite sympathies, and the only elite sympathies for anything beyond Putinism do tend to be for Putin's sort of very aggressive imperialist nationalism, tend to be for ethno-nationalism. So I would find that to be a more likely pathway that could, in turn, actually involve somewhat more democratic procedures. And to just remember that, as annoying as sometimes one can find their fellow citizens. Certainly, we have north-south divides in the UK. That the real enemy is Russia, and to not let them exploit, and to stay together as Ukraine has done so wonderfully and impressively for a very long time, but especially in the harrowing conditions of February 2022.